Donald Trump had once been a man who remembered every detail, every name, every deal. He knew the faces of every employee, the smallest nuances of every project, and the dreams of every executive who worked for him. But during the collapse of his empire in the 1990s, that sharp memory began to fail him. He could no longer recognize the very people who had stood by his side for years. Senior executives, men and women who had shared victories and defeats, looked at him with concern while he stared back blankly, confused and exhausted. The empire that had seemed untouchable was crumbling, and with it, a part of Trump himself seemed to vanish. The stress was invisible from the outside. To the world, he was still Donald Trump, the fearless businessman, the man who could command rooms and headlines alike. But behind closed doors, he felt hollow. He could not remember names, could not follow conversations, and often sat silently for hours, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The weight of billions in debt, failed deals, and mounting pressure pressed on him like a storm with no end. He was surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. The irony of his life was cruel. A man who had been built on power and presence now felt like nothing. Nights were the hardest. In the quiet, when the city slept and the noise of success and applause had faded, Trump faced himself. The silence was deafening. Thoughts, fears, and doubts swirled in his mind. He remembered every public victory, every headline praising him, but those were overshadowed by the shame of failure. He wondered if the empire he had spent years building had been nothing but an illusion. He questioned his own abilities, his own strength, and for the first time, the name Donald Trump sounded hollow in his own ears. The man who had once defined himself by knowing everything now felt like he knew nothing at all. Closest to him noticed the change. Friends and family tried to reach him, to offer advice or comfort, but he remained distant, lost in a world of his own despair. It was not arrogance that made him silent, it was exhaustion, mental and emotional, unlike anything he had experienced before. The fear of falling, of being forgotten, of failing in front of the world, was greater than any fear he had ever faced. And in that fear, he felt a grief so deep, so raw, that it consumed the competent exterior he had spent a lifetime cultivating. Years later, people would see Trump rise again, stronger, louder, more defiant than ever. But few would understand the nights he spent staring into darkness, struggling to remember the very people who had built his empire with him. The collapse had taught him something painful but lasting. Even the strongest men have moments of fragility, and even the most powerful faces mask their deepest despair. Behind the headlines, behind the money, behind the bravado, was a man who had been human once, and in that humanity, he had known the most profound sadness of all.
Whose inspiring story of politician would you like to hear next? Tell us in the comments below.